Conditions May Apply by Cinnamon Pinecones. Read by Distracted by Books. Chapter 54. Cats Out of the Bag. Izuku showed up at the address Shinso gave him a little before 6:30 and paced around nervously for nearly another 15 minutes before he built up the resolve to walk in. Beyond the entrance, there was a modestly sized studio with about half a dozen kids and an instructor at the front. She looked to be supervising spars because everyone was paired up and fighting. Shinso was doing pretty well against the beefy kid he was paired up with until he caught sight of Izuku and got a kick to the stomach for the distraction. Izuku just slapped his hand over his mouth in shock as Shinso let out a pained grunt, and suddenly everyone's eyes were on him. "Midoriya!" Shinso greeted excitedly after brushing off his opponent and sensei's concerns. I'm so sorry, Shinso," he sputtered out inelegantly. Shinso just laughed it off. "No, that was my fault for getting distracted. Koizumi-sensei, this is Midoriya," he introduced. "Midoriya, it's nice to meet you. Your talent precedes you," she said as she gestured to Shinso. Both of them went beet red at that. Thanks," he squeaked out. She laughed kind-heartedly at his timidity. "You're sure this kid's the one who taught you to fight like that?" She poked at Shinso. "Oh, yeah. I think it's all part of an intimidation tactic. You'd never see him coming. He's playing mind games with us all," Shinso joked with a nervous laugh. She nodded theatrically at that, walked over to Izuku and offered a hand out to shake, which he took. Kami, she had a hell of a grip. "So, Midoriya, want to show us what you've got?" she challenged. His face must have mirrored his stomach dropping to his feet because he heard Shinso snort at him from behind his sensei. "You don't have to, kid, but I must say I am curious," she amended in response. "No, it's... yeah, okay. What are the rules?" he asked. Her pleasant smile turned a touch feral at that. "What are the rules?" she repeated. "Oh, this is going to be fun." She gestured him over to one of the mats, and he dutifully followed. "All right. No quirks, no head or groin shots, and avoid sending anyone to the hospital. Who wants to go first?" she asked, turning to her class. When no one volunteered, Shinso snorted out a laugh and stepped forward. "Okay, Greenie, I hyped you up. Don't make me look bad," he said as he stepped across the mat to stand in front of him. Once he got into position, he bowed and looked at Izuku expectantly until he did the same. The second he straightened his spine, Shinso lunged at him. He was already so on edge that he just reacted. And before he even realized what was going on, he had Shinso pinned to the floor. "Yeah, okay. I guess I asked for that." Shinso's reply was muffled by a face full of mat. Koizumi-sensei's grin had turned full-on feral when he looked back up at her. "Anyone else want to go?" she offered to the class, who all resolutely stayed in place. When no one stepped forward, she clenched her hands into fists, cracking all her knuckles at once, and turned her attention to him. "Oh, sweet goodness. May I?" she asked politely. Shinso laughed at him again from where he'd rejoined his peers at the side of the mat, and Izuku shot a glare in his direction. Izuku was wringing his hands, but he nodded regardless. This was fine. Just act like Ivy. If you can disarm random street thugs with a gun, you can fight this probably very talented martial artist and get a face full of mat like a champ. Come on. It's better than gravel. And she looked nicer than Eraser anyway. Or at least far less sadistic. Hopefully. Maybe. Oh, Kami. Koizumi-sensei stepped to place that Shinso had just been standing and bowed. Izuku got the memo and bowed back to her, and braced for strike the moment he stood up. But she was just studying him while adopting a fighting stance. She wanted him to make the first move? No, not fair. He didn't know her fighting style at all, and he had nothing to go off of. That was a dirty trick, but he took the bait anyway. He threw a punch, but she caught him by the wrist and tried to twist it up behind his back. But he just twisted with the motion and wrenched his arm free while simultaneously using the momentum to aim a kick to her flank. But she dodged out of the way, and so started their dance. Izuku didn't know how long they were throwing strikes and dodging around one another, but he was starting to relax, and this was actually fun. It was nice to fight against someone who you knew wouldn't hurt you. Not that Eraser ever really hurt them, but he definitely wasn't gentle. Was she going easy on him? He wasn't going easy on her. Should he be? No, she was a professional, and clearly she could hold her own. After Kami knows how long, she called for a timeout, which Izuku was very grateful for. Both of them were panting and sweating, but she was still smiling ear to ear. Jeez, kid, she forced it out between labored breaths. It's 7. I need to end class, she explained. Oh, great. She didn't time out for her own sake. She timed out because they ran out of time. Great. Izuku definitely wasn't about to keel over or anything. Nope. Did you guys catch all that? She asked with a smirk as she faced her class. The whole class was staring at the two of them with wide eyes, and Shinso's mouth was agape. Kami, he'd forgotten they had an audience. He was so focused. He felt a blush creep back onto his cheeks. Hopefully, he was already sweaty enough that it wasn't noticeable. When you said you were going easy on me, you weren't kidding. Shinso finally piped up. His blush definitely had to be noticeable now. Koizumi-sensei laughed at that before dismissing the class, but Izuku wasn't listening too closely because he was still trying to catch his breath. Shinso stayed back, so Izuku followed his lead as the rest of the class shrugged on jackets and shoes and filed out. You're a real talent, kid, Koizumi-sensei finally said after taking a swig from a water bottle and offering one to Izuku, which he gratefully took. Yeah, Greenie, you really were holding out on me. How did you get that good in less than a year of lessons? Shinso asked. Koizumi-sensei looked at him incredulously. Less than a year of lessons? She demanded. Yeah, I've been on and off practicing for a few years, but I've only had a teacher for the last year, he stuttered out. I have got to meet your teacher, she declared. He, he's, uh, he's not very, he's not a people person. Don't think that's a good idea. So he's a hard ass. That'll get you learning quick, for sure, but damn, kid, you're good, she relented as she offered her hand out for another shake. He took it and stuttered out thanks and goodbyes as quickly as he could and waited for Shinso to finish lacing up his high tops before blessedly being able to leave. Once the door shut behind them, he took in a dramatically large lungful of air and huffed it out. You good, Greenie? Shinso asked. He hummed in response as he took a few more deep breaths. Not a people person either, he admitted. You did great, Midoriya. That was awesome, Shinso soothed. He took a moment to shake out his limbs and take another deep breath before responding. Yeah, okay. Thanks, Shinso. Let's go. It's getting dark, he prompted before heading to the direction of Shinso's house. Shinso fell into step with him and started talking about the classes and how they'd been going so far. How he was pretty nervous at first, too, but he really liked Koizumi sensei, and she was actually really nice once you got past the brash exterior. The mindless chatter was soothing, and he shook off the nerves quickly. Hitoshi was halfway through a story about how he managed to trip up the star pupil of the class on his second day when Midoriya interrupted him. Shinso, do you have cash on you? Midoriya asked. He had just been joking around with him a few seconds ago, but now his tone was unusually tense. It was out of place. Yeah, a couple hundred yen. Why? He responded. I need you to stay calm, okay? Well, he was relatively calm, but he very much wasn't anymore. Why? He asked with trepidation. There's someone following us. I can handle it. If he asks for your wallet, just give it to him, okay? He was not staying calm. Not at all. The last time a shady figure ran into him walking in the streets at night, his father died right in front of him. He bled out on the concrete, and there was nothing he could do. No, he was not staying calm at all. That couldn't happen again. Shinso, I can handle this. Do not get involved. We're just going to keep walking. He might leave us alone, but if he catches up to us, I need you to run, Midoriya stated calmly. He wasn't stuttering at all. Hitoshi had noticed it less and less lately, but there wasn't even a hint of it in his voice right now, and somehow that was even more off-putting. I am not leaving you, Midori. His words were cut off as something pulled the back of his jacket and tossed him to the ground. Something was dragging him backward, and he scrambled around to see Midoriya still on his feet and jumping off the wall of a nearby building, dodging an elongated arm trying to grab at him. Shit, that guy must have some sort of stretchy quirk or something. He had him by the collar of his jacket, and he was not letting go. Hitoshi tried his best to claw and punch at the skin, but his short nails didn't do much, and the hand still had held firm. He could feel himself getting road rash on his lower back where his shirt had ridden up as he was dragged toward a nearby alley. He heard a pained shout from the distance he was being pulled in. He heard a pained shout from the direction he was being pulled in, and the grasp released. He turned around and got to his feet quicker than he ever had in his life. It looked like Midoriya had stomped on the arm, dragging him away, because he could see the vague imprint of a dirty shoe on him as Midoriya charged forward. Shinso, run! He shouted over his shoulder. It was like everything was moving in slow motion. Midoriya was getting closer and closer to the man by the second. What if he had a weapon? He probably did. No one goes around trying to mug people without a weapon. All of a sudden, the only thing he could hear was the horrible slicing sound of his father being skewered. The sight of the blood dripping down the man's blades clouded his vision, and the metallic smell as he bled out on the sidewalk filled his nostrils. That smell was something that he would never forget. As long as he lived, he couldn't let that happen again. Hey, dickhead! He shouted at the top of his lungs, fighting through the fog in his mind and praying to gods he didn't believe in for a response. Who the hell you The man responded and froze. Midoriya, don't touch him! Hitoshi warned, and Midoriya immediately stopped in his tracks. Midoriya was looking back and forth between Hitoshi and the man who had attacked them with his jaw agape. Damn it. Tie your arms up behind your back, he commanded, his voice shaking. The man followed his instructions, and Hitoshi didn't look back at Midoriya. He couldn't bear to. He could feel his hands shake, but he focused on maintaining control over the guy that was after them. After a moment of tense silence, Midoriya spoke up. Shinso, can I tie his hands up properly? That was not what he had expected. Gently, he responded. He watched Midoriya strip off the belt and bind the man's hands together. He wove the strip of fabric through his arms in a complex pattern before buckling it. That would certainly be difficult to escape from. Both his limbs and the belt were in a tangled mess. The man stayed under his control, and Midoriya slowly backed away. He took a moment to study Hitoshi and positioned himself between the man and Hitoshi before pulling out his phone. Southeast corner of Block 37. Attempted mugging. Perp has an elasticity quirk. He is currently restrained. Send the closest responding unit. He barked into the phone before hanging up and pocketing it. He turned his focus back to Hitoshi. The cops will be here soon. Are you all right, Shinso? He asked calmly. How was he so calm? They just got attacked. The guy was still there, and he just barked out orders to the operator like he was reporting the weather, and he'd just seen Hitoshi do that. Hitoshi just stared at him owlishly. His hands were still shaking. He could still smell the blood. No, not that. There was no blood. Well, there might be. His back got pretty scratched up, but it wasn't Shinso. Midoriya's voice pulled him back to the present. He was standing right in front of him now. When did he get so close? Shinso. I'm going to grab your hands, all right? He asked calmly as he slowly extended his own hands forward. He didn't get too close until Hitoshi nodded. He held Hitoshi's shaking hands between his own and looked him in the eye before speaking again. Everything's all right, okay? Can you hear the sirens? The cops are almost here, he soothed. How is he so calm? Why was he holding his hands so gently? He still had a vice grip on the other man's mind. He was standing there like a lifeless doll awaiting another order. Why wasn't Midoriya afraid? His vision was a blur of red and blue, and his ears were ringing. All he knew for sure was that Midoriya hadn't left. His hands were still holding his own. Half of him wanted to push them away, wanted to run, to hide from what he knew was going to happen, but the other half of him was 7 years old again and paralyzed with fear and grief. He wanted his mom. Oshi. Hitoshi. Midoriya's calm voice brought him back to the present again. He blinked away tears and his vision came into focus. You can let go now. They've got cuffs on him. You can let go. He didn't even realize he was still holding on to someone's autonomy. The thought made him sick. He dropped his hold like it had burned him. Call it a dickhead, you little brat! He heard the man scream before looking around in confusion as he was shoved into the back of the cruiser. He must have looked as scared and disgusted as he felt because Midoriya squeezed his hands to get his attention again. It's okay, Shinso. I already told them what happened. You're not in trouble, and your mom is on the way to pick us up. She'll be here any minute, he explained. As if on cue, he heard a car come to a screeching halt on the side of the road next to them. And when he turned his head, he saw his mom, still in her house slippers, running towards them. Midoriya let go of his hands and started to back away, but he didn't get far because as soon as his mom reached them, she pulled both of them together in a crushing embrace. Oh my goodness! Oh my goodness! It's all right. You two are all right, right? She asked, sounding frantic. Yes, Shinso-san. We're fine, Midoriya responded. She pulled back and put one hand on each of their cheeks and looked back and forth between them like she couldn't take Midoriya's word that they were fine, like she needed to check for herself. Once she was satisfied, she pulled them both back into a hug. Oh, thank Kami, she let out with a sigh of relief. Are you Mrs. Shinso? One of the officers asked from behind them. Yes, I am. All right, you can take your son home. We may be in contact to get a statement from him later, he responded. Both his and his mother's gaze flicked over to Midoriya, who was starting to look a little bit on edge. I'm also taking care of Midoriya here while his parents are unavailable, she lied. Unavailable? The officer inquired. They, uh, they're overseas at the moment, Midoriya piped up. I won't be able to contact them until like 4 a.m. tonight. The officer looked hesitant to accept that, but thankfully he had mercy on them and conceded, all right, I don't want to keep us all here until then, anyway. You boys should go home. I have your contact information, Mrs. Shinso. Midoriya has already given a statement, but if we need more information, we will reach out. His mom quickly shuffled them back to the car, but before they left, she turned around in her seat to look back at Midoriya. Did your parents actually leave the country and leave you home alone? She asked. Midoriya seemed to have gone back to his usual nervous stuttering. Um, yeah, dad works in America and my mom is visiting him, but a family friend checks in on me most nights, so it's fine, he said as he picked at his nail beds. It didn't sound like he was fine with it, but Hitoshi couldn't find the wherewithal to speak, much less emotionally comfort his friend right now, so he remained silent in the front seat as his mom sighed and turned around before starting the car and heading back towards home. End of chapter.